July 4th, 1997, Mexico City. A man lies on an operating table. Surgeons work through the night, reshaping his face, removing fat, trying to create a new identity. He isn't an ordinary patient. He's the most powerful drug lord in Mexico, the man who ruled the skies, Amado Carrillo Fuentes. For nearly a decade, he moved cocaine across continents in private jets. His empire stretched from Colombia to Chicago. His fortune was counted in billions. Politicians dined with him. Generals took his calls. Even his enemies whispered his name. But power like his comes with a price. The DEA was closing in. His allies were turning against him. His own face had become a target, recognized everywhere, hunted by both law and rivals. That's why he was here tonight, to erase the man he had become, to trade his identity for survival. Would he succeed in disappearing from the world he built? Could he truly get rid of his past? Or was it already carved too deep beneath his skin? This is the story of how Amado Carrillo Fuentes tried to outfly his own legend and what it cost him. Welcome back to Cartel Files. In this video, we'll uncover the rise and fall of Amado Carrillo Fuentes, the man the world came to know as the Lord of the Skies. We'll dive into how he built one of the most powerful drug empires in Mexico, the fortune that made him untouchable, and the choices that ultimately led him to the operating table that night in 1997. Amado Carrillo Fuentes was born in 1956 in the dusty fields of Navalado, Sinaloa, a place where the drug trade wasn't just a crime, it was a way of life. He grew up watching men build fortunes from the ground up, not with businesses or banks, but with drugs moving across the border. Power was measured in weapons, and respect was earned in silence. His uncle, Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, better known as Don Neto, was one of the founders of the infamous Guadalajara cartel. Amado was just a young man when Don Neto brought him into the organization. It was here that he learned the language of smuggling, bribery, and survival. But Amado was different. While others relied on violence, he relied on strategy. He studied logistics, watched how routes were built, and learned to think like a businessman. He saw the future of the drug trade, not in trucks or boats, but in the skies. When the Guadalajara cartel fell apart in the late 1980s, Amado didn't crumble with it. He took his knowledge, his connections, and his ambition north, to Juarez, a city that would become the center of his empire. There, he rebuilt from the ashes. He bought planes, not one, but dozens, turning the skies into invisible highways for cocaine shipments from Colombia to Mexico, and then straight into the United States. While others smuggled in small loads, Amado moved tons in a single flight. Every landing made him richer. Every deal made him more powerful. And soon, the world would know his name, El Señor de los Cielos, the Lord of the Skies. By the early 1990s, Amado Carrillo Fuentes wasn't just another trafficker. He had become a shadow power, a man whose reach extended far beyond the border. The Juarez cartel, under his control, operated like a private government. He didn't just move cocaine, he moved systems. Politicians, military generals, and high-ranking officials worked under his influence. The head of Mexico's own anti-drug agency, General Jesus Gutierrez Rebollo, was later exposed as being on Amado's payroll, protecting the very empire he was supposed to destroy. It wasn't just one man. It was an entire network of loyalty bought with money, favors, and fear. When Amado wanted to move a shipment, military planes could be cleared, and police checkpoints simply looked away. He understood something most traffickers didn't. That real power didn't come from bullets. It came from control. Control over people, over institutions, over silence. He bribed the right men, eliminated the wrong ones, and built a system where even his enemies had to play by his rules. At his peak, Amado's cartel was moving tons of cocaine every month, not in small boats or hidden trucks, but in Boeing 727 jets. Each flight carried millions of dollars in profit, landing in Mexico's desert airstrips before the product was quietly pushed north to the United States. The DEA once said he was responsible for some of the largest cocaine movements in history, shipments so vast they had to measure them in tons, not kilos. But behind the logistics and the money was a man known for his shrewdness and his ruthlessness. Inside the Juarez cartel, betrayal was a death sentence. No one crossed Amado and lived to tell about it. Even whispers of disloyalty could end with a body buried in the desert. His power wasn't loud or chaotic. It was precise, cold, calculated, and yet, despite his brutality, he maintained an air of elegance. He lived like a ghost in luxury, owning mansions across Mexico and even estates in Chile, gold-plated bathrooms, fleets of cars, private airstrips, all hidden behind layers of legitimate businesses and clean names. And he lived exactly like the legend he'd become. Reports describe mansions with golden ceilings, imported Italian marble, private runways, and villas so vast they looked like royal estates. His parties were said to rival those of monarchs. Crystal chandeliers, rivers of champagne, and guests that included powerful businessmen, politicians, and celebrities, all eager to stay in his good graces. But it wasn't just the money that made him dangerous. It was the respect. People didn't shout his name. They whispered it. To the government, to his rivals, to those who feared him. He was untouchable. Amado Carrillo Fuentes had risen higher than any Mexican trafficker before him. And like the empire he built in the clouds, he seemed to hover beyond reach. He didn't just run a cartel. He ran an empire. With his fleet of private jets ferrying cocaine from Colombia to Mexico, Amado turned airspace into his personal highway. That's how he earned the name El Señor de los Cielos, the Lord of the Skies. The skies that once carried Amado Carrillo Fuentes' fortune began to darken. By the mid-1990s, his empire had reached its peak, but so had the attention it attracted. The DEA, Mexican Federal Police, and even international intelligence agencies were closing in. Authorities were closing in around him. Fear of arrest, he had to keep moving constantly, flying under fake identities, rumored to have traveled to Cuba, Russia, and South America in search of refuge. His once iron grip on the Juarez cartel began to tremble. Corruption could only protect him for so long. Now, betrayal was coming from within. Reports began surfacing of his paranoia. He stopped trusting even his closest associates. In late 1996, several of his own men, lawyers, accountants, and police officers on his payroll, were mysteriously killed. Those who once dined with him now feared being summoned. Amado had turned his empire into a fortress of fear. And then came the decision that would seal his fate. A new identity, a new face. Getting rid of his past crimes led him to the greatest decision of his life. He decided to change his face through plastic surgery. In early July 1997, under a false name, Amado checked into a private hospital in Mexico City. He wanted a new face and a new life. Facial reconstruction, liposuction, a complete transformation to erase the Lord of the Skies forever. The surgery lasted nearly 8 hours. But before he could rise as a new man, his body gave out. Within days, the story broke. Amado Carrillo Fuentes was dead. But the aftermath was even more chilling. The 2 surgeons who operated on him disappeared, only to be found weeks later, their bodies encased in concrete, showing signs of torture. It was a message from someone inside the world Amado had built. Even in death, his name carried danger. His empire, now without its pilot, began to fall apart. Rivals in Juarez turned on each other. The cartel split into factions, blood filled the streets, and the once invisible network that moved billions began to collapse. The Lord of the Skies had finally crashed, not in the air, but under the weight of his own power. In the end, Amado Carrillo Fuentes tried to escape himself, but couldn't. He had the money, the power, the reach of his shadow empire. But no amount of gold or jet fuel could outrun the past. Some say he died on that operating table. Others believe he faked his death, That El Señor de los Cielos still lives under a different name, watching the world he once ruled burn itself to ashes. If you have found the video interesting, hit like, share, and subscribe to Cartel Files.